So I told you about hydrocarbons and why are they hydrophobic, right? They're scared of water, they're fear of water because uh, the bonds between a carbon and a hydrogen is not polar. Bond between a carbon is non-polar, equal sharing of electrons, right? And that's true with a lot of hydrocarbons. And remember, we kind of focus in hydrocarbons because your molecules, your big molecules, your big macromolecules like proteins, like nucleic acids, like lipids, like carbohydrates, they're pretty much based on carbon, right? Okay. So a lot of these molecules are going to have a lot of carbon hydrogen bonds. Okay. But here comes the but. Sometimes you're going to have some other atoms bonded to the carbons, which are going to give the molecule a little bit of a personality. Okay, so the unique property of organic compounds depend on the carbon skeleton, and we talked about that. I'm going to draw you one here one more time. This is going to be a 6-carbon molecule. That means it has 6 carbons, right? And I'm going to draw you the hydrogens. I know this looks like a hydrocarbon. You're absolutely right. A lot of carbon, a lot of hydrogen, right? And carbon can make 4 bonds, right? And if you can count them, you can follow, you see that carbon is always making 4 bonds, right? Okay. Now, before I move on with the rest of the molecule, check this out. The unique properties of organic compounds depend on the carbon skeleton. Okay, so we talk about, but sometimes uh, there can be some other atoms that can be attached to this skeleton. Okay, and we're gonna call that a functional group. Functional groups. What are functional groups? They're a group of atoms. Okay, they're a group of atoms that add a special property to a carbon-based molecule. I call it, it gives them some kind of personality. Okay, either lets them act a little bit different, and that was really nasty. I don't know what, I can't even understand what I wrote there. Here we go again. It gives them a bit of a personality. That means that, remember I told you hydrocarbons are hydrophobic? Well, what if we add a functional group that makes part of that molecule a little bit hydrophilic? Okay? The whole point about this functional groups is that these atoms that hang out with carbon-based molecules can add new molecular properties. Okay, can allow them to react in different ways. So if we go back here to my molecule, you can see that I kind of didn't finish drawing the molecule, right? Because this carbon here, this carbon needs one more bond. Instead of adding a hydrogen, I'm going to add a hydroxyl group. And this is going to make a huge difference because this part of the molecule can now be a little bit polar. Why can it be polar? Because if you remember from chapter 2, oxygen is electronegative. Oxygen is going to be kind of the electrons from the hydrogen, for example. Okay, and it's going to be making it a little more negative, which makes it that this part of the molecule can probably even do hydrogen bonds with other molecules or with other parts of the molecule. You see how these hydrocarbon that we drew in my previous video, okay, and this hydrocarbon that I'm almost exactly the same, the only thing that changes is the fact that I added this functional group. But now we're giving it a little bit of a different personality. Now this molecule here, because it has a hydroxyl group, an OH group, now that part of the molecule can even do some hydrogen bonding, probably with another part of the molecule. So we give it a different characteristic. We give this molecule a bit of a different personality. Okay. Now this is just an example of a functional group Of course, this is not the only functional group that you will be seeing throughout the chapter. You can also see something called a carbonyl group. Here, a carbonyl group is going to be a carbon. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It's going to be a carbon double bonded, okay, with an oxygen. Okay, or a carboxyl group. You get to see this a lot in protein. Carboxyl group, you have a carbon double bonded to an oxygen, okay, and also kind of a hydroxyl group here as well, okay. But the whole thing here, all of this is called a carboxyl group. An amino group. When you hear amino, you're gonna be thinking about nitrogen, okay. Amino means it has nitrogen in it. Again, you get to see this amino group a lot in proteins. Also in proteins, you get to see a sulfhydryl group. Okay, and this is not very common, but this is just something that pops up in proteins a lot of times. That it's important because this group can do something called a cross bridge, so it can bring two parts of the protein together. Okay, making a bridge. Okay, the point of the here, guys, is that again the punchline is this: our molecules are organic molecules. You are made of organic molecules. If you are made of organic molecules, most of your molecules are going to be based on carbon, right? That's going to be the backbone of your molecules. And a lot of these carbons are going to be attached to hydrogens, okay? But then we can add functional groups to some of our chains of carbons, and that is going to give these hydrocarbons slightly different types of personalities or new functions or new ways to interact. Okay, for example, it can make a molecule a little more hydrophilic. Okay, and that is the kind of the new properties that a lot of these atoms will, or a lot of these functional groups will give to a carbon chain, to a molecule with a backbone of carbon atoms. These are hormones, estradiol and testosterone, the female and the male hormones. Okay. If you look at this, you can see, I'm gonna talk about testosterone really quick. You see chain, you see rings, right? Well, what are these rings made of? If you said carbon, you're absolutely right. Okay, they're made of carbon, a lot of hydrocarbons. Okay, remember we talked about how some hydrocarbons can make branches, or they can be straight lines, or they can be straight chains, or they can be all in rings. So look at this, a lot of rings. Okay, you will see that these molecules, testosterone and estradiol, okay, they're kind of derived from cholesterol, from fats, okay, from cholesterol. Now, what makes the difference between the male and the female hormones? Well, functional groups, right? And here, let me do this in green. Functional groups make the difference. Check this out. This part, this part is a little different, right? This part is a little bit different, right? And also the fact that you don't have a double bond here as well, and over here, okay, and over here. So that is what changes a little bit between estradiol and testosterone. The rest of the molecule is pretty much the same, right? The rest kind of changes. So you see how sometimes specific functional groups or specific bonding patterns can change the molecule, or can give the molecule a specific function or a new function, okay, changing the function or changing the signal or changing just the function of that molecule. So again, that's what's so important about these functional groups. These functional groups are going to give these atoms or these molecules a new kind of personality or a new function. Okay, it's going to make molecules a little bit different from each other.